Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my story. Today is this month's patron pick. First of all, thank you so much to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and I want to give a special shout out to everybody this month for giving me such a unique topic to talk about. The topic that was decided during this month's patron pick vote was for me to tell the story of how I became involved in magic and judging. And as you probably already saw by taking a look at the YouTube video, it's pretty long. But it is a real story. There's good guys and bad guys, and there's a lot of action along the way. So I hope everybody enjoys it. This isn't the sort of video that I would normally make without a little bit of prodding from people who have told me that they would be interested in seeing this sort of thing, so I hope everybody else finds it interesting too. So, I'm going to start at the very beginning, and I do mean the very beginning. So take a look. Feast your eyes on the very first trading card that I, Judge Dave, ever owned. And I still remember, to this day, finding this old beat-up Magikarp in my school's parking lot when I was in grade school. Obviously, this was back when base set was the current Pokemon set, and, well, the Pokemania had been in full swing and had gripped my school too, just like it had hundreds and thousands of others all across the nation and even the world. So, this is the first trading card that I ever owned, and I did play the Pokemon trading card game for a while. Like many people, I probably was playing completely wrong, and I didn't really have a firm grasp on how the rules worked, but hey, this is the way that we start, from humble beginnings, as they say. So, this is kind of how I started out in the trading card game sphere, and of course, back when I look at how I have developed, well, I kind of think, wow, it would have been really cool if I was playing Magic back when I was a little kid in grade school. Whether or not it would have been possible for my little kid brain to have grasped all the rules, maybe not. But it would have been really cool if I had really expensive Magic cards. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that every card out of Alpha and Beta is worth money regardless of how good it is? Well, guess what? Pokemon's not the same way. It would be really cool if a beta switch was worth the same as a beta forest or a beta web, but hey, those are the breaks, I suppose. Another cool, kind of interesting fun fact is that even though I didn't really play the Pokemon card game past the Team Rocket expansion, I never really stopped playing Pokemon. And in fact, if you're going to be at the Pokemon Regionals here in Fort Wayne this weekend, come and say hi because I'll be judging that too. But you didn't come here to see the story of how I became a Pokemon judge, so let's take a look at what the next thing I would consider in my Magic development would be. And this is where I actually played the game of Magic for the first time. And this would be sometime when I was in high school. And a kid that I was friends with showed it to me while I was at some sort of a scouting event, and that was my first actual exposure and getting to play the actual game of Magic. And I gotta say, one of the things that I remember about that specific thing was even then I could think, wow, the rules for this game are so complicated. I couldn't really remember everything that this guy was telling me, and I was really afraid that I was screwing up basically every time I made a play. And so if you're the sort of person who identifies with that sort of feelings, well, you're in good company. Everybody starts that way in Magic because it is kind of complicated. The rules are pretty long and there is a lot of stuff to remember. So that's my encouragement to you, is that I started in the exact same place. So everybody starts in the beginning. So after a while, I actually got really interested in Magic and I got really hooked on it. I did eventually, of course, manage to get the rules down somewhat. And so I was actually starting to play on a more regular schedule. And this is kind of funny too. I wasn't actually playing in any sort of structured, organized environment. I was, like many people even today, playing in the back room of a putt-putt mini golf in the city that I live in. And that is my Magic experience. That's what first got me into playing Magic on like a regular set schedule. And it is kind of funny to me because there isn't a whole lot of kitchen table Magic that I played after I started going to more organized tournaments, but this is where I started out. And a couple of things, this is way before the invention of Commander or even EDH, way before anybody even considered playing those formats. And so what we were actually doing was playing normal 60-card Magic decks, albeit pretty janky, but they were decks that we cobbled together with the cards that we had access to. And so fortunately for me, I actually got a bunch of Magic cards from one of my cousins who had stopped playing. And so I did have like a fair selection of stuff that I could go through. And ooh boy, I still remember the very first deck that I got some success with, and it was a Pestilence deck. And so I had Pestilence and I had Cemetery Gate. That's the combo, by the way, if you notice. So the Cemetery Gate doesn't die to Pestilence. I think I actually had to end up buying Cemetery Gates. Can you imagine that? I had some other stuff in there. I had Consume Spirit from the then current block at the time, Mirrodin block. I had that card. I didn't, of course, want to lose myself from dealing a bunch of damage to myself. So I had the creature that would guarantee the Pestilence could stay in play, and then I had something that would guarantee that I would have more life than everybody else. And then I also had this, Extraplanar Lens, another Mirrodin block all-star, where I could double the land count from my swamps. And so, yeah, that was my first, and in the environment that I was playing in, that deck was actually pretty good. I actually got a lot of, success with that deck, and that was where I really started thinking, hey, this is a fun game. I could maybe become pretty good at this game. And so the next step for me was to go to my first Sanctioned event. And as far as I remember, the first time that I went to a Sanctioned Magic tournament was the Fifth Dawn pre-release. And I want everybody to know something. This is, again, Fifth Dawn at a time in Magic's history where pre-releases were one per state. And, that's how it was for me in the United States. If anybody wants to chime in with how they set that up in other parts of the world, I'd actually be very interested. But yeah, at this time, pre-release was not a local event that you would go down to your local game store to play. It was actually a bigger event, several hundred people in my area, where you would have to drive down to the in my case, Indianapolis, and you would play in a large sealed tournament, kind of akin to a sealed GP, but at a lower rules enforcement level. To give you a little bit of a hint, this is actually before the term rules enforcement level was even invented. So yeah, this is back in back in my day, as they say. You had to get a DCI card and fill it out to become part of the DCI, so that you could join a sanctioned Magic tournament. And it was a big event, right? Like this was not a something that you went to at the store and you were there for a couple hours and that was it. This was an all-day thing, and it was a big event. You were surrounded by a bunch of other people who are all Magic players, and maybe you weren't playing Magic the entire time. Maybe you scrubbed out and you wanted to do some pickup games, or you wanted to trade some cards, because this is the pre-release, and therefore the first time that you would have the ability to get cards out of the new set. And so that was a really big experience, and I really, I really liked that. But at this event, I saw a bunch of people, and they were playing Standard, and that kind of got me like interested in playing like on a more sustained basis, like playing more tournament Magic on a more regular basis. And if you don't know what Standard is, it used to be this format that was really popular. It used to be a very popular format. And Standard was basically the last 2 years of Magic sets. And so when I say Magic sets, that's kind of misleading. So this is before they had all this Dominaria Remastered and Convention Boosters and Baldur's Gate and straight to Modern sets and straight to Commander sets and stuff. All of these boxes that you see here, those are what you would call standard sets, sets that are intended to be played in the standard format. But the last 2 years worth of those would be, roughly what sets were legal in standard. And there was also this idea of Magic blocks, which would mean that like you would have 3 sets that all were based around a certain theme. They would all share the same sort of mechanics, and the setting for those sets would all be the same story-wise, and the story that happened in those would form like one kind of an arc of the Magic greater story. And so for a long time, years and years and years, that was how Magic was packaged. It was in these blocks. And so Standard would be like the last two blocks basically, and one block would come out every year. So I got this idea that I wanted to give standard a shot, and so I eventually was able to, through like opening cards and trading with people, to get an actual functional standard deck. And if anybody maybe knows where maybe knows where this is headed, this is actually like one of the worst times in Magic history to get into standard. The format was very centralized around one specific deck, which was Affinity. And so if you think about like Darksteel Ravager, the card from Darksteel, Arcbound Ravager, if you think about that in conjunction with like all the artifact lands and the newly printed equipments, which were new in Magic, there had never been equipments before, and you've got stuff like Disciple of the Vault, which can drain you every time an artifact dies. And you have like Atog to help the Arcbound Ravager to attack for big damage and kill a lot of your artifacts off. It was a very good deck. It was very powerful, very consistent, and it had substantial metagame share. So much so that they actually had to ban cards in standard. And this is another thing that's changed in Magic's history. Back in this time in Magic's history, if stuff got banned in standard, that was a big deal. It was very rare for things to get banned in standard. In fact, I think that like prior to the bannings that happened from this deck, the Affinity deck, I think that it was probably about a decade before that was how long it had been since something had been banned in standard. And then it was another decade until Stoneforge Mystic and Jace the Mind Sculptor were banned in standard after the Affinity. So at this point in time, it was actually extremely rare for something to get banned in standard. Now, of course, that's not really the same ethos that they have. But that was not the standard deck that I went for. I actually went for another deck that was called Tooth and Nail, and the card name is Tooth and Nail. So that kind of like gives you a hint at what's maybe going on here. So the idea was that you would ramp into this Tooth and Nail, sort of like a Tron deck. In fact, exactly like a Tron deck, because back at this time, the version that I went with, the Tron lands were legal in standard. And so that was what a lot of the decks actually used to ramp into the Tooth and Nail. So once you were able to play an Entwined Tooth and Nail, you could tutor for any two creatures and put them onto the battlefield, no mana required. And so you would be, a lot of the time you would be getting these two, Triskelion and Mephidros Vampire. And these two form a combo so that if you ping something with the Triskelion, a creature, well, that will give you another +1/+1 counter so you can ping something again and again and again. And so that being the case, your opponent will never have any more creatures, ideally. Another thing you could do would be, after they printed Kiki Jiki, sometimes you would see Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker plus Darksteel Colossus, and then you could like start attacking for lots of damage. So that was basically the idea behind that deck. And that was the first standard deck, like, actual, tier 1 standard deck that I ever owned. And I started with that playing in FNMs, and that was around like 2006, I want to say. Is when I like first started playing in FNMs. And even to this day, I still love playing in FNMs. I still think that FNM is like one of the best ideas that Wizards has had as far as like things to get people to actually physically play Magic. I do have like a unbroken string of FNM promos starting from around that time and going up all the way until they ended the idea of FNM promos with Fatal Push. And so that's something that I really liked and really have had a lot of fun with. And yeah, I've played a lot of FNMs over the course of my Magic career. So a little bit after that, of course, I was in high school at the time, and I moved on to college. And while I was in college, I had a problem. And the problem was that I didn't have a car, right? So that would mean that in order to go to FNM, I would have to walk like a little over, like it was a few miles. To a game store, while carrying my bag of stuff with me. And so that was kind of not really practical. And so what I actually ended up doing was I would start holding drafts in my dorms. And so I eventually got to a spot where, at the peak, there was like 30 plus people that was showing up every week, and we would do one, sometimes two drafts. We'd like go back to back right after we finished the first one. And yeah, we were doing that every week. It was fantastic. And so that was what I was doing while I was in college, and I started that around the Lorwyn block, and then after a couple of years of college, I actually went and studied abroad, and I highly recommend study abroad opportunity if that's something that you're in a position to be able to take advantage of. I personally think that stepping outside your comfort zone is a hugely important if you're trying to continue to grow as a person. And let's just say that's a great opportunity to step outside your comfort zone, especially if you're going to a country where they speak a completely different language. And so that is one of the really big things that I did when I was in college is I studied abroad at Shanghai Jiaotong University in China, and it was completely different. Everything was different except for one, actually, because the first thing that I did, or one of the first things I did after getting situated and like unpacking and in the dorms is, okay, let's see if I can find a place where I can play some Magic. And I did. I went out on a little expedition. I spent probably about a day going to different places. Here's a fun fact. If you think the Wizards of the Coast ability to find game stores through their website is, subpar, I encourage you to try it in a foreign country, because let's just say that was a real modern miracle that I was able to find a store eventually that did, and it was great. I was able to play FNM throughout that semester in a completely foreign language, and I made some great friends while I was doing it. Even though my Chinese was extremely poor, I still was able to, play a lot more than I initially anticipated, and people picked up that my knowledge of the rules was kind of, above average, and so eventually it got to the point where, like, if somebody had a question that they didn't know the answer to, they would like bring me over. And sometimes they would speak English and sometimes not, but they would try to figure out a way to describe what was happening, what one of the players was trying to do, and then I would try to describe whether it would work or not, and like maybe a little bit about why or why not. And so I think that's kind of funny that even without being able to speak the language, I was still able to have that kind of experience. And that's the real power, I think, of Magic the Gathering, is being able to go somewhere that's completely foreign to you in every sense of the word, but still have this common bond with people and this ability to connect with people on a deep level. And so after I came back, there was something really interesting going on, which is that Modern, the format that today I play the most, was invented. Yes, invented. I was there for the invention of Modern, and I was actually very keen on it because it turns out that like the beginning of Modern, like the first sets that are legal in Modern, is actually corresponds very closely to when I started playing Magic. So unlike Legacy, where I would have to make a concerted effort and actually buy a bunch of Legacy cards if I wanted to play this format, with Modern it was basically like all cards that I already owned, and that was really fantastic. And so it went really well with my first year back from college, because about that time is when Wizards came up with one of the best ideas that they have never followed up on, which is the FNM World Championship. Yes, you heard me correctly. And if you were not playing back in 2011, 2012, I believe, you really missed out, because FNM World Championships was a thing. And so what that was every match point that you got at FNM was recorded. And the 100 people who had the most match points got to go for free to Gen Con to participate in the FNM World Championships. And that was a thing that they did. That was literally a tournament that they had take place. Now, I'm from Fort Wayne, and Fort Wayne is a fantastic spot if you wanted to play FNM. First of all, unlike most places in the world, at this time in Magic history, Fort Wayne was free to play FNMs. All of the FNMs were free to play. And that was super great. And another thing that was super great is that the stores understood what was going on. And so there was an FNM that started at like 3 or 3:30, and there was an FNM that started at 7. And because at this point in Magic history, stores were only allowed to have 2 FNMs per week, there was another game store that set up their FNMs to be at 7, and then another one at 11 o'clock. Now, I'm sure that some of you Magic degenerates already understand what's going on here. But yes, this enabled players from Fort Wayne to be able to play 9 to 12 rounds of FNM every week. And that is absolutely a thing that several people from Fort Wayne did. And that is not something that apparently was available anywhere else in the world, which I thought was shocking. But yes, indeed, Fort Wayne area fielded out of 40 people from the United States who were invited to the FNM World Championships. 11 of them were from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Over a quarter of the United States delegation to the FNM World Championships were from my hometown, including myself, and both of the eventual finalists, which unfortunately was not myself. But even though that was among the worst performances I've ever had at a Magic tournament, that was still a really fun time, and it was also my first trip to Gen Con. That was a really great, kind of fun thing to do as I was coming back from college, and that was, kind of one of the like first times that I actually went to a big tournament that was not a pre-release or a Grand Prix. And so it really showed me like a different side of Magic, especially getting to play like some of the like non-FNM World Championship events at Gen Con after I scrubbed out. And as it happened, I became very interested in judging at Gen Con after I became a judge. And it still to this day is something that I try to go to every year. Even though I really do like the competitive aspects of things, I really do love the atmosphere of a kind of a less formal convention style atmosphere. And Gen Con to me really epitomizes what that's all about. Okay, so you might have noticed that we're up to summer 2012. Almost a decade after I started playing, and I still haven't talked at all about being a judge. And that's correct. Up until a little bit after this point in the story, I actually had absolutely no intention or desire to become part of the judge program. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is. And so I remember a few years ago, I was at a judge conference, and one of the presenters asked all of us to think, what's the worst thing that a judge ever did to you? And I had an immediate thought of what the answer to that question was for me. I had an immediate memory that came to my mind. And it wasn't the time that the judge manager from a well-known tournament organizer tried to entice me into an amorous relationship in another state with the prospect of getting staffed on that organizer's GPs. That is something that happened, but that isn't what came to my mind. I promise I'll talk about that a little bit more in the future if you're interested. But no, the worst thing that a judge ever did to me happened really early on in my Magic career. I remember I went to a few different pre-releases back in the very early days. Fifth Dawn and the first few from the Kamigawa block. And during one of those pre-releases, I remember this story. I was walking around and I passed by. There was a table with a bunch of boxes of pizza on it. So someone bought pizza for all the judges. And so I was walking by and I was like, oh, what's this? And the judge told me about it, and he's like, yeah, the pizza's for like all the judges. They organizers bought it for us. And so I kind of joked to him. I was like, well, what do I have to be a judge? And this person said to me, he says, you have to pass a test. It's pretty hard. You'd probably fail it. and Well, if my rules knowledge at this current time, like right now, as I'm making this video, is here, maybe it was down here at the time that the person said this to me. I've always been extremely interested in Magic's rules, and as a result, I've always had a pretty high level of rules knowledge. I think I probably could have passed that test and surprised this person if I would have thought to do so, or had the confidence in myself to do so. But no, I just walked away, and at that moment I thought to myself, that's the judge program. That's the judge program in a nutshell. A bunch of people who are really arrogant and they think they're better than everybody else, and they think that because they could pass a test, that makes them better than Magic players. And that really turned me off from the whole thing. And so that is the worst thing that a judge ever did to me. It was an offhand comment that some guy made to me at a pre-release, and in terms of how much damage that did to my confidence and my opinion of the judge program, and my future development as a member eventually of that program, that really was it. The lasting impacts of just a single comment that someone made really is extremely unpredictable and extremely can affect someone a lot more than you ever know. And so when I eventually did become certified, I thought about that moment, and I thought, I don't want to be a judge who's responsible for that memory in another person's life. And so that is the ideal that I've strove for the entire time that I've been a judge, is to remember that I'm no different from a normal Magic player. It's just that I have a fancy black shirt. That's the only difference. There's other people out there who are Magic players who probably have better rules knowledge than I do. They're probably better at doing a lot of other kinds of stuff than I am. It's just that I'm the person who's physically in charge of trying to go through this event. Now, to be fair, I think the judge program has actually improved a lot with that sort of ethos. But certainly at that time in Magic's history, that was a common complaint that I've heard from not just other players, but even some of my own colleagues in the program who remember things at that time. And so I think now is the time maybe to talk a little bit about how I actually became a judge. And so to answer that question, we have to go back a few years to something that started a few years prior to this point in the story, which is the Star City Games tour. And Star City Games had been going around to various cities on the East Coast and the Midwest principally, and having large Magic tournaments in those locations. And so I was interested primarily as a player to go to those tournaments. By this point, I had bought enough cards that I had like a playable, legitimate Tier 1 Legacy deck, and I already had a Modern deck. And so because of that, I was interested in going to play the Legacy format, which was always on Sunday. And unfortunately, a lot of my friends, in fact, all of my friends that I played Magic with, had absolutely no interest in playing Legacy because they did not have a Legacy deck. Legacy was much more affordable at this point in Magic's history. It was several price doublings ago. And so, like, for example, the most expensive dual land that I ever bought was a Underground Sea. And I bought a playset of them for probably $500. And, you'd be lucky to get one of them for that price nowadays. But I had all the cards that I needed for my Legacy deck, and so I was really interested in playing it. And so one of my friends suggested something. He was a judge, and he said, if you judged on Saturday, then you could play on Sunday, and then you'd be able to go to these events with us, and that could be a way that you could participate. Because my original plan was to just go down on Sunday and like not care about the standard. But apparently everybody that I was friends with was mostly a standard player, so that plan wasn't going to work. So that was the idea. I went down, And this is another big change from how things are. I was able to certify at an SCG Tour event. And I remember that when I went down there, I actually got to talk to some of these judges, and I was really scared. I thought that they were gonna treat me the exact same way as what I had been several years ago, and what I had kind of mentally accustomed myself to thinking that all judges were like, and so I actually found the complete opposite. The community was very welcoming to me, and there are several specific individuals that reached out to me with a warm hand and helped me to acquaint myself with the standard practices of judging, and made my first tournament a really successful one. And the real cherry on the top for me personally was that the judge that certified me, Karsten Haza, was actually one of only a handful of judges that I actually knew before that day. One of the authors of Cranial Insertion, and in fact had been one of the authors from Cranial Insertion for a very long time. Such was something I knew because Cranial Insertion was one of the key resources that I used in order to gain my own personal knowledge base. So I did take the level 1 exam. I got 100% on it, and I thanked Karsten personally because several of his articles were no doubt behind the knowledge that I used to get that score on the exam. And so that's the story of how I became a judge. And later on, one of the high points to my personal judging career was that I was later asked to write a guest article for Cranial Insertion. And so it felt extremely surreal to have come full circle like that, and be able to do something that contributed towards the resource that I had drawn so much from. So that's it. That's the story of how I became a judge, and what I did in order to do that. Again, that's something that I don't think is the usual way that someone becomes certified. I think most of the time, even at that point in Magic's history, the normal way was that you would work with a local shop, and then maybe you would get to go to a PTQ or something similar. An actual PTQ, because this is before PPTQs were invented, or maybe you would take a trip to a Grand Prix and like work with a judge there. So having your first actual event that you judge be something of that scale was, I don't think that's something most people would do. But again, it matches very well with me because my first sanctioned event ever was also something of that scale. So that was my introduction to the judge program. Now, when I went in, I only ever really planned to be a level 1 judge. I would go to these Star City Opens, and I would judge on Saturday, and sometimes I would get accepted to judge on Sunday too, and I would do that too. But if not, I had the Legacy event, so that was all right. And then what happened was, over the course of about a year, I would be able to get staffed on pretty much all the events that I was applied to. But then I started getting declined for events, and so that is a little discouraging when it happens to you. And it will happen to you as a judge. I can say that that's a thing that happens to a lot of people. They'll be the it girl for a few months, a few years, who knows how long. But then eventually they'll start to like lose their spot to someone else. And the first decline, it really hurts. And the second decline, then it really hurts because you're like, oh, what did I do wrong? And so I started thinking to myself, well, why is it that I'm getting declined? And so I think the answer to that question is probably because I was a level 1 judge. Now, is it right for people to think that level 1 judges are here and level 2s are here and level 3s are here? Maybe not. But I can tell you for certain that is a thing that actually does happen in the program. People who don't know you, and even people who do know you, will look at the number next to your name, and they'll think that that's a representation of how good of a judge you are. I don't personally agree with that standpoint, but I'm only a level 2, so how much could I really know about things? So it's the same sort of, the same sort of attitude really, that I had back when I didn't want to become involved in the judge program. It's the idea that, like, because you passed a test or because you did X, thing to get yourself up to the next level, you're better somehow. So the same sort of elitism happened. And hey, you know what? I'm a gamer. I can play the game. So I got certified for level 2. And guess what? I started getting applied. My application's accepted again. So I'm not sure if that's related, but I'm pretty sure it's related. So that is the story of how I became a level 2. I started getting declined for events, and I wanted to keep doing events, so I became a level 2 judge so that I could keep getting accepted to events. Another thing that there was a big benefit for being a level 2 was that in addition to being able to continue being part of the community that was starting to get accepted into, level 2 judges have an additional superpower that was of some interest to me, which is that level 2 judges can certify new level 1 judges. At least at this point in the judge program, that was the case. And so in order to administer the level 1 exam, you had to be a level 2 or higher judge. And that was actually something that was very, very exciting to me. As somebody who has a background in education from my college days, that was something that I kind of had been doing, especially as somebody who's by this point got a reputation for being pretty above average rules and policy knowledge. People were starting to come to ask me for advice, and I definitely liked giving that sort of advice to people. And so as part of the like preparation for that, I guess, I started writing articles on a blog. And so that was something that I never thought that I would do, right? Like, after I got done with college, I was like, there's no way I'm doing any more homework, right? Writing is, I have to write, it takes so long, it's kind of boring, is anybody ever going to really read this? It's kind of a slog, but I did. I started a blog, and I started writing articles, and I wrote every month. For the period of about 5 years, I was publishing an article a month was my normal publication schedule, and I stuck with that for the entirety of the time that I was actively involved in that. You can still see some of those articles today if you're interested. I'll leave a link in the description. But that was a real turning point in my judge career, because I had now the ability to mint new judges, and I was interested in doing so, and the allure of teaching was very powerful for me. And so that's exactly what I started to do. And then later on, probably I would say a few months after my first my first article got published, I got an opportunity to present at a judge conference. And judge conferences were very different at this time. Each region only got 2 conferences a year. So there was a lot more incentive to go to any given conference, because there wasn't going to be another one next month. If there was one that was remotely close to you, you got everybody in your car and you drove to that judge conference. And that was basically how it worked at that time. Kind of like how pre-releases have changed. The positive being, of course, that it's open to a lot more people, but the negative being that it's a lot less of a special event. And I really think there is something to be said for having special events like that. So I did a presentation, and I talked about continuous effects, and I worked very hard on that presentation. And it eventually became one of the most popular presentations that I have ever given, probably the most popular one. I've given it to several times, probably dozens of times by now, to different audiences, and it's always very well received. And so it was really satisfying giving that presentation for the first time, knowing that I'd worked really hard on something, and people were appreciative of that. And so then I eventually started writing more presentations about other different topics. And, that certainly is something that moved itself into judging for the win. So after that, I was a level 2, and level 2s have another very powerful thing that they can do, which is go to Grand Prix. At this point in Magic's history, basically all of the judges who were on staff for a Grand Prix were level 2s. There was occasionally level 1s that were staffed on the side events area, but basically the Grand Prix were very exclusive, and in order to get staffed on a Grand Prix, you basically had to be a level 2. Or 3, obviously, or 4 or 5, because this was during a point in time when those levels existed in the judge program also. And so I started going to Grand Prix now that I was a level 2. And I mentioned this earlier, that story that I said before, one of the staffing managers for, large tournament organizer that ran GPs did actually proposition me to move to another state and start an amorous relationship with the premise that that would result in me getting staffed in Grand Prix that this organizer was responsible for. And I wish I could say that this was unique, but as far as I'm aware, my experience isn't actually even that unusual. It turns out that exchanging favors for opportunities is something that happens pretty much everywhere where opportunities exist and specific people are in charge of handing them out. If you're ever in a position like that, where someone in a position of power is trying to use that to convince you to do something that you don't want to do, stay strong. It's not worth doing something that you're going to regret, even for one opportunity that might seem like it's irreplaceable. If you keep doing things the right way, the opportunities will eventually come to you because people will notice. And conversely, people will notice if you do things the wrong way too. For example, the person in my story, turns out that after being outed as a registered sex offender, they're no longer involved in the Magic or judging community anymore. Me? I ended up getting plenty of more opportunities to do Grand Prix, thank goodness, because it's something that I really like to do. In July of 2016, I had another huge milestone where I went to my first foreign Grand Prix. I'm not counting GP Toronto as a foreign GP, even though technically it is across the border. No, I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And why did I do that? It was because there was one specific judge at another Grand Prix who said that I should try it out. And that's exactly what I did. I spent probably about a year and a half trying to teach myself enough Portuguese that I could be familiar at least with how things could go and maybe take a basic call. It was definitely a really positive experience, and I encourage anybody who feels like they might also have a positive experience doing something like that to go for it, even if you're a little intimidated by speaking in a foreign language. Another really powerful thing that came out of this was PPTQs. There was another really great thing that came out around this time was PPTQs. I judge a lot of PPTQs in my day. Basically, the idea is that you would go to this store level event, a PPTQ, and that would qualify you to play in a Pro Tour qualifier, which would eventually get you to the Pro Tour if you were able to do well enough in that. And this was great for me because it gave me a lot of opportunities to judge in weekends in between when big tournaments were happening. So I actually ended up getting relationships with a bunch of different stores. And Magic players who wanted to tag along with me to one of these PPTQs, well, that was a great win-win too, because I could have some companionship on the trip out there, and they would get a free ride that was very unlikely to bail out on them. I had a bunch of friends that I was always trying to convince to go to more Magic tournaments like this, and one of them, my friend Scott, was with me for a lot of weekends in this season. In the summer of 2017, I got accepted to another really big, powerful Magic tournament, that being a huge GP in Las Vegas. Now, this was another really big milestone for me. I took a plane ride out there. Everybody was having an amazing time. It was a great Magic event for everybody, and I was having a great time judging it. Las Vegas is one of my favorite cities, and I've been there for 3 Magic tournaments so far. So, after this event happened, I was checking my phone, and I noticed something that was a little bit troubling. I don't usually like to check my phone during Magic tournaments when I'm on the clock for obvious reasons, but I noticed that there were a few calls that I got during that event. And I finally pulled it out and checked my messages, and a bunch of people had tried to contact me. Right away, I knew that this had some sort of deeper meaning because it's very unusual for that many people to contact me all at the same time. I checked on Facebook and I saw some messages that indicated that one of my friends, who I'd gone to a lot of Magic tournaments with before, Scott, had died in a car crash. Turned out that on his way home from work, he got hit by a drunk driver. A big message I have for everybody: if you've been drinking, do not drive. Call a cab, call a friend, stay the night. Drunk driving is not worth it. It's not worth the risk. This is another thing that I really wish I could say was a unique freak thing, but it's actually something that I've seen happen a couple of times, even in my own local area. However, if there's one good thing that can come out of it, it's that the Magic community has historically done a great job of coming together in times like these. After Scott's funeral, I had a tournament that I organized in his honor, and we raised several $1,000s to help with his final expenses for his family. That was another really positive moment that I had as a judge, getting to use my skills to do something that was meaningful even beyond the game and the things that we were doing just as a pastime. To this day, I still keep a program from Scott's funeral in my car so that I can travel with him to all the different Magic tournaments that I go to. Around this time, I fortunately got another really big opportunity that helped me take my mind off this issue. It turned out that we needed somebody in my region to organize the Magic Judge conferences that we were going to have. You see, there had been some changes in how judge conferences were handled. It was no longer 2 per region per year. Now, you could have as many judge conferences as you wanted, you just had to make sure that the number of judge promos that you handed out was underneath a certain limit. Obviously, this required having a little bit more coordination with what was going on. And the person who got picked to do that coordination in my region was, well, me. I started a very successful tour where I had judge conferences in every state in our region multiple times per year, and I think that everybody in the community got really a lot of value from getting to go to more judge conferences. I was super happy that I was able to be a part of that, but another very valuable side effect for that was I was able to start a YouTube channel. See, I had a bunch of opportunities to go to judge conferences and record presentations that happened there. And so I thought, what a great way to share with the community what's going on. Even the people who aren't physically present at these judge conferences can still learn and benefit from them. And so that's exactly what I did. If you take a look at my channel, that's what a lot of the earliest stuff is. Then I started having some more ideas. What if I had a judge contact where I could talk with another judge and maybe we could talk about some topics that people would be interested in? It's not a judge conference, but we could still be doing that same sort of presentation and sharing it with a lot wider audience. And of course, that's exactly what I did. I had a bunch more videos on my channel where I did exactly that sort of thing for a couple of years. Even after Judge Academy took over a lot of the duties of creating content so that judges and prospective judges could learn more about the rules, I still kept on creating content because it's something I was really passionate about. Then something really crazy happened. In the year 2020, there was this gigantic pandemic that shut down Magic tournaments entirely for a couple of years. And it turns out that at about the same time as this was happening, something else really crazy happened. Call it luck, call it a coincidence, call it fate, whatever you believe in. At about this time, my YouTube channel started getting a bunch more exposure. I was getting 10, 20, 100 subscribers per week. I couldn't figure it out, what was going on. And then I found that a few of the judge roleplay scenario videos that I had published had gotten a lot of views. They seemingly were picked up by the algorithm, and people were really enthusiastic about it. Really enthusiastic. I'm not sure why I didn't think about this before, but I had always kind of pictured my channel as being something that pretty much only judges were going to care about. But it turns out that a lot of players were really interested in this sort of thing too. Even now, I'm really excited every time I get to do one of these roleplay workshops, and the reason why is because I get to share the Magic Judge experience with a bunch of people who might not otherwise be able to experience it themselves. And as a result, my YouTube channel was gaining in popularity at exactly the same time as I was looking for something that I could do to fill up a bunch of my now free weekends that I wasn't working Magic tournaments in. As a result, on January 1st, 2021, I published DDR number 1 about opalescence and humility, starting a long chain that brings us all the way up to the present day. And so that's pretty much where I'm at now. So where am I going in the future? And that's a really important question that I've been wrestling with for a few months now, as my 10-year judge anniversary is coming up. You see, it's actually kind of an awkward question too. All of the original reasons that I had to get into Magic have all gone away. I no longer harbor any delusions about becoming the next big name pro. All of my friends that I used to enjoy this game with have all left one by one for their own personal reasons, and I kind of feel a little bit lost. There isn't really a lot of stuff that I can do that really relates to the reasons that I was really originally interested in Magic. I talked to a bunch of my colleagues about this, and, well, the results were kind of mixed. A lot of them had the same sort of ideas. The ones who were involved in the program for 10 or 20 years, many of them said that the thing that kept them going was their friends that they'd made along the way. But here's a fun fact. I'm actually really awkward in real life, and I don't make friends very easily. A lot of the people that I know from the judge program I consider more as coworkers or colleagues than friends. And so I was really confused about what I should be doing. Is the only reason that I'm still in the judge program a sunk cost fallacy? At that point, I got accepted to the first Magic Con in Las Vegas. Aside from being the biggest Magic tournament in recorded history, there was another really big positive thing that happened there. I got met and greeted by dozens of people who were fans of the YouTube channel. And I got a bunch of positive feedback about ways that my channel, stuff that I had personally done, had helped them understand something better or helped them to become a judge themselves. It was a really amazing feeling. And at that moment, I understood something really important. And I want you to think about it too. Right now, you, personally, the person watching this video right now, you're the reason why I'm a judge. You're the reason why I keep doing this sort of stuff. It's because there's people out there that I've never even met who are appreciating and understanding this work that I'm doing. No matter how you're supporting the channel, whether you're watching the videos, subscribing, or even supporting me on Patreon, I want you to know that you're the reason that I do what I do, and you're the reason why I don't see myself stopping being a judge anytime soon. But that's all I have for you today. How did I do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.